Most people think avoidants love silence. After all, they're the ones who vanish, delay replies, and hide behind being busy when things get too close. But here's the twist. When your silence lasts longer than they expected, it doesn't sit as comfortably as you'd imagine. It stirs up a storm inside them that most people never see. Research from attachment theory shows that avoidant individuals monitor relationship signals far more closely than they let on. They're used to controlling emotional distance, creating space while expecting you to eventually bridge that gap. When you don't, it shifts the power dynamic in ways they never prepared for. The silence they use as a shield becomes a mirror reflecting their own patterns. And avoidants aren't used to facing that mirror. I've worked with hundreds of people navigating avoidant dynamics, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. The moment someone stops chasing, the avoidant's internal world shifts dramatically. What's fascinating is that this shift happens in predictable stages, each one revealing a deeper layer of their emotional experience. Let me show you exactly what happens. At first, they feel relief. The pressure's off. No emotional intimacy, no uncomfortable conversations, no conflict. They interpret your silence as compliance, like you finally understood their need for space. But here's what they don't say. They expect you to resume contact eventually. In their mind, this is a pause, not a permanent shift. Your early silence feeds their ego more than their fears. They feel in control. But that's only the beginning. Marcus told me about his avoidant ex who would disappear for days at a time. When he finally stopped texting first, she seemed unfazed initially, even posting carefree stories online, showing up at social gatherings, acting completely unbothered. She assumed he'd crack within 48 hours like he always did. But this time was different. The first 3 days, she didn't even check her phone much. She felt liberated, vindicated even. See? Space is healthy. This is what I needed all along. Her friends noticed she seemed lighter, more present. What they didn't know was that she kept expecting his name to light up her screen. As your silence stretches past their mental timeline, something fundamental changes. Avoidants live in a world where they control the pace of closeness and distance. When you don't break the silence, they lose that control. They may not admit it, but they like knowing they can re-engage on their terms. They like having you in orbit when that expectation breaks. Their security in the dynamic cracks. They rationalize. They're busy. They're giving me space. They'll come back. But with each passing day, certainty fades. Then comes the first flicker of unease. Did I push too far? Avoidants rarely see themselves as the ones at risk of losing someone. They built their lives around the belief that closeness can be restored when they're ready. But now, with no movement from you, that ground begins to shift. The control that once felt empowering starts to feel isolating. That's when they start testing the waters, viewing your stories, liking an old post, maybe a vague, just wondering how you're doing, message masked as casual. They won't say, I miss you, but those breadcrumbs are the avoidant version of reaching out. By day 5, Marcus's ex was watching every Instagram story he posted within minutes. On day 7, she sent a meme with, thought you'd find this funny. No context, no real question. Just testing if he was still there. When he responded with a simple, haha, yeah, and nothing more, she felt something unfamiliar. Rejection. These check-ins serve a dual purpose. On the surface, they're maintaining a casual connection. But underneath, they're seeking reassurance that the dynamic hasn't fundamentally changed. They want confirmation that you're still available, still interested, still willing to do the emotional heavy lifting. When your silence remains steady, it does something most people never manage. It makes the avoidant feel your absence in a way that penetrates their armor. Avoidants are experts at dulling their emotional needs. They learn early that wanting too much gets you hurt, so they shrink those wants until they seem invisible. But your prolonged silence forces those wants into the open. They feel a faint longing they can't quite name. The irony? They wanted space, but now that they really have it, they're not sure they like it anymore. The freedom they crave starts to feel like abandonment. The independence they value begins to feel like loneliness. This is when the narratives start, not as manipulation, but as a coping mechanism. They tell themselves you're playing hard to get, try to punish them, or that you found someone else. These scenarios allow them to place discomfort outside themselves. If they admitted your silence is simply your new boundary, they'd have to confront the possibility that their behavior has consequences. That's a hard truth for someone used to emotional control. It's easier to create stories where they're the victim of your game playing than to acknowledge they might have genuinely pushed you away. The longer you remain quiet, the louder their insecurities become. Underneath that calm exterior, many avoidants carry deep fears. Not being enough, not being wanted, being too difficult to love. Your silence leaves a void, and voids fill whatever they've been avoiding. Maybe they're done with me. Maybe I'm not worth the effort. Maybe I really did mess this up. There's also pride. If they've always had the upper hand emotionally, your sustained silence challenges that belief. Pride makes them hesitate to break the silence first, because doing so means admitting they care more than they've shown. But the longer silence lasts, the more pride battles a growing need for reassurance. By week 2, Marcus's ex finally called. Her voice was different, quieter, almost vulnerable. "I've been thinking, did I do something wrong?" It was the first time she'd ever asked that question. Marcus noticed she wasn't offensive or casual. She sounded genuinely uncertain, maybe even scared. That phone call revealed something crucial. Beneath all the avoidance, there was someone who desperately wanted connection, but didn't know how to hold on to it without sabotaging it. Eventually, if your silence holds, something deeper happens. They realize they've been outplayed at their own coping style. When you match and exceed their distance, they're forced to feel what it's like on the receiving end. They begin to understand emotional emptiness that comes from prolonged disconnection. For some, this becomes a turning point where they must choose between continuing the same patterns or risking vulnerability to rebuild connection. This is where growth becomes possible, but not guaranteed. Some avoidants will use this moment to genuinely reflect on their patterns. Others will retreat further, reinforcing their belief that relationships are inherently threatening. The difference often depends on their level of self-awareness and their willingness to do the uncomfortable work of change. By now, your silence isn't just space. It's a statement. It says, "I won't chase you. I won't beg. I have my own emotional world, and I won't shrink it to fit inside yours." Avoidants begin to pick up on that energy. It's different from the silence that comes from anger or manipulation. It's the silence of someone truly at peace with letting go if necessary. And that triggers both respect and fear. Respect because you've shown you can stand your ground without drama. Fear because they now understand you can live without them. This realization is profound for someone who's built their entire relational strategy on the assumption that others need them more than they need others. When avoidants feel this shift, some will attempt to re-engage in understated ways. A casual text, a random meme, sudden interest in something you're doing. These are tests to see if the door is still open. For others, the silence pushes them into deeper retreat, especially if they're not ready to face the emotional risks of reconnecting. Either way, you've changed the unspoken rules. The relationship can never return to the old dynamic where they controlled all the distance and you managed all the closeness. Here's what matters most. Your silence didn't change them. It revealed them. It brought to the surface emotions they usually keep buried. Curiosity, insecurity, longing, even regret. It exposed how much their control relies on the other person's willingness to close the gap. If you're in this position, understand that staying silent isn't about punishment. It's about shifting focus on their behavior to your own self-respect. When an avoidant feels the weight of your absence more than expected, it's because they felt what happens when their usual escape hatch leads to an empty room instead of someone waiting. And in that moment, whether they admit it or not, they know they've met someone who can't be controlled by silence. Not every story ends with reconnection. Marcus eventually moved on because he realized his worth wasn't tied to someone else's ability to show up. But that silence taught him something invaluable. The right person won't make you feel like you're too much for wanting connection. The right person will meet you halfway, not leave you perpetually chasing. Your silence reveals who's willing to do that work and who isn't. It's not about winning or losing. It's about honoring yourself enough to stop settling for breadcrumbs when you deserve the whole meal. True wisdom isn't about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. If this resonated with you, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more insights on relationships and human behavior. Until next time, stay grounded in your worth.